Okay, just another little quick update on where things are at right now. I did something a little bit different I haven't done before because normally it just takes so long. I'm actually going to incorporate a piece of wood into this. And I'm going to set my gauge here in the wood panel that I made. And I've got a little toggle switch here, and this is where I'm going to put my wiring so that I can turn everything on and off really easy right there at the switch. And I've built my brass housing for this, and this is going to be so that I can solder on the pieces, and it's going to hide the fictitious mechanism that actually makes everything work and reads out on the gauge here that obviously is, again, just a costume piece. And I've also built my leather battery case here, and this is a really simple design, and all it is just a one-piece leather fold-over design, and I measured everything out, marked it, and put some scoring grooves, and then wet form this so that you get the leather really wet and block it into place around the deal. And I'm going to put a snap on it right here, and then this will just simply mount permanently right on top of my battery box there, and I'm going to rivet the leather onto the bracer, and then I'm going to rivet this separately onto the bracer, probably with just a couple of mounts on the side here. It doesn't have to be just a whole bunch because we're not going to be actually fighting with this or anything. So it'll stay in place nicely, I think, with 2 or 3 rivets. We'll see. Then all that'll go right here on the back side of the bracer that was running this way, and this will be a left-handed bracer, and that's something you want to think about too, especially if you're doing something that's asymmetrical like this, so that the gauge has a readout. And normally a watch, it's symmetrical this way, so it doesn't matter which hand you switch it to, you can always have it facing up. But with something like this has got a front and a back, and you can't put this on the right arm and switch this gauge around. You'd have to actually take it physically apart and redo it the other direction. So this is going to be made to go on a left arm, so that when you look at it, the gauge will be here facing you and it won't be upside down. If it was on the right arm, it'd be upside down because it still has to be the front. So think about those kind of things when you're doing your design work as well. And I'm going to go ahead and work a little bit more on getting my lighting and stuff soldered onto the box here, and get the wiring in the back side, and get the rest of my pieces all together here for my lights. The mechanism itself is getting really close, and I'm just going to finish that up, and we'll be back as soon as I get some more progress. Alright, just another little update here. Things are really starting to come along here on my device on the top side. I've got my wiring done. The LEDs are in their little areas right now. I've got the wiring coming into the back side of the box here, and all I have to do is wire it up to my power source and my switch, and then I've got to set my switch and readout right there, and that will go right on top of the battery pack just like that. And I've got to set up probably just looks like I'm probably going to need one mounting point right on the back side here, maybe 2. I'll have to decide that once I get to the rest of I'm just waiting for I don't like to use a lot of hot glue. I'm kind of hot glue is not a great permanent thing. I do almost all soldering, but what I do like to use the hot glue for is when I'm seating in some of the glass tubing and stuff, and the electronics, because it acts as an insulator. So once I do my solder joints on my LEDs, I'll put a little dab of hot glue to kind of seal it up and keep it from touching any of the pipes and stuff like that and grounding out. And then I'll add a little dot of hot glue on the either end of the tubes when I put the glass tubes in there, and that acts as kind of an insulator so I don't have anything hard hitting the glass. So just different things to think about when you're doing this, partially for safety. I mean, obviously when you're working with little glass vials, it's always possible to break it. But we don't want this just to break really easy. You want to take whatever precautions you can when you put it together. So I'm just waiting for that to heat up, and then the final thing that I'll do is I'll solder my, I've got a point right here set up on my tank, and I'm going to solder that right directly to the box. Once that's done, that'll make this solid so it doesn't move. But before I do that, I want to seat this. So I've got this on the little springs right now so that I can get this back up inside where it goes here. And once that's in, then I'll solder that together, and then we'll be ready to go in and start doing some alignment on the leather and doing the decorating and finish work on that, and then we'll go to assembly. Alright, so here we have the final piece to the device all finished up, and we're ready to go back to our leather work and start doing the design work and finish work on that. I've got all my wiring set up here so that everything comes on and does what it's supposed to, and now it's just a matter of putting it all together and finishing up the design. Okay, so we're back at the leather table now, and what I'm doing is I want to make sure and lay out the design on here for the actual functional piece, and then decide how I want to do my decorative additions. I do the leather stamping, you know, with the gears and the tooling and stuff in there, and I like to do that as an accent. I don't like to overdo it. I think, you know, just the aesthetic of the gear designs and stuff is really appealing to me, and I think to a lot of other people. But you know, I also, you know, I don't grab just a whole bunch of actual gears and place them on there that really don't have a function. You know, sometimes I'll add one or two for color and effect, but you know, they're purely decorative. But the stamping, I think, you know, impressing it actually into the leather as part of the design, I think is just as viable as putting scroll work or any other hand tooling designs on here. I just like the look of it. Originally, my design was, in my head, was to do something kind of like I did on the Chatterbox, where I did sort of a line design here, you know, to give it an illusion of a cutout with gear stamping in the side. But there's so much extra empty space underneath the device under here that's visible, and I want to leave that plain. It's already a little bit busy, but just adding a little bit of you know, background in there, I don't really want to waste the space. So I think I'm going to change up my design, and that's something too to think about when you're doing the design work and stuff. And what you have in your head is not necessarily what you're going to come out with, and you want to be okay with being flexible and changing the design. And you know, don't get so rigid that no, this is how I have to make it look. You know, go with what works, and you know, if you got to change it up a little bit, don't be afraid to change the design and kind of experiment with some different stuff. So what I've done is I've laid out my all my mounting holes on here already, so I know exactly where all of these pieces are going to attach, and I think that's something that you really need to do. You know, make sure you know where everything's going to be before you go to the design work, because you don't want to, number one, be putting, you know, for instance, I don't want to be stamping stuff right here. You're never going to see it. But you also don't want to leave, you know, blank spaces when you're actually doing the composition and arrangement of any decorative work. So it needs to make sure that the pieces work together and it looks like they belong together. So always keep the overall design in mind, and don't be afraid to change and adapt. So I'm going to get some stamping done, and we'll be back in a minute. I'll show you where I'm at. I've got some of the stamping and stuff done here, and one of the things that I do just want to kind of mention that when you're doing the stamping, you know, with especially with the gears and stuff like that, you know, do the composition. Try not to get too terribly busy, but one thing you want to avoid is the Mickey. We don't want Walt Disney coming after us, and for some reason, I know it's something you don't think about it, but every now and then you'll end up laying some gears in a pattern, and once you see it, it's hard not to see it. So try to avoid the Mickey stamp if you can. Something that not everybody sees right away until after it's done, so just thought I might mention that in the design aspect of things. Now all we've got to do really is kind of wait for this to dry. Once it's dry, I'll be able to take it to get the dye work done, and we'll show you kind of how it starts to take shape after we start getting it all together here. Alright, so actually now we're moving to one of my favorite parts. This is where everything really starts to take shape, and you kind of see, you know, what the finished product is going to be looking like. Now I've done the first part of the dye process that I use on this, so you can kind of see now how the the colors and stuff are starting to work together, and it's starting to look more like a finished piece. I just wanted to kind of show you, this is the first step on the dye that I use. I'm doing an antiqued brown on this. And the antiqued brown, what I'm doing, I've got my base coat of brown, and it's got a little bit of a fade to those darker edges to give it that older look too. And I'm going to go ahead, and there's a couple more things I'm going to do to this, and I wanted to show you kind of the in-process stage. And okay, so now we're back. We've got the final finished work on the dye done here, and you can see what I've done is I added that edging line in, and I cut my little accent lines, and I've got those dyed and set up as well now. So everything's ready to go for assembly, except for one finer detail that I think I mentioned it earlier, and that's the edging. And we talked about doing gum trag on the edges, and that's where this leather is a rough edge surface. Even though we took the edges and went down and took off the sharp, now this is rough. And so I thought it's really important when we talk about executing the design and getting that professional edge, to go ahead and do all those little things like adding those trim finish lines, you know, the little, just the decorative addition, stuff like that, and proper finishing. When you do the thicker leather like this especially, you want to run an edger on it, and this is what I'm using. Particular brand is I think it's EcoFlow. It's available at Tandy Leather, but there's, you know, a lot of different varieties of this that you can get. And what this actually does is it seals the edge up, and you put a little bit on the edge, and then you use a slicker. This one, they come in different shapes and sizes. I've got an old plastic one that's got different size on it. This one is wood. I've been using it lately, trying it out to see how I like it. And basically it's just a matter of getting a little bit of your gum trag on the sides. This is a handy device too if you haven't got one of these. This is great. It's supposed to be an edge dyer, but I use this to put my gum trag on the edges of the leather, and it's so much faster to get it on there properly. So once I get my gum trag on there, then I'm just going to take my slicker, and I'm actually going to run this just really fast. And what this is doing is burnishing. You can look that up if you're not sure what that means, but it heats up slightly, and it heats up the gum trag and the components in it. I think it's got a paraffin or something in it, and that just smooths this right out. It's just nice and slick and smooth now. So you want to do that, you know, all the way around on your edges. Anytime that you've got rough, you know, anything that the thicker leather, you can go down to the thinner stuff if you want. Usually anything that's 6 ounce or heavier, I try to do the edging and stuff on. Sometimes the 5 ounce leather, if it's really flexible and soft already, it doesn't do very well with the edging. But anything that you're going to have that's going to be a stiffer leather with a little more body, always do those little extra things there. So hopefully those little tips will help you out and get that speeded up faster. So, alright, so here we have final assembly here. Finished product. As you can see, everything seems to be working on it so far. I've got my switch here. I've set up my battery on the back side here so you can access and change the battery. One of the great things about LEDs, they take such a small amount of power. Those batteries really will last for quite a while. Now I've got this fitted on myself. It's just set up with a 3-buckle system. One of the things that if you're going to design for yourself, you know, you got a lot more leeway. But if you're going to design these for somebody else to wear, it's really, I think, important to test everything that you do when you get your patterns and stuff down. Now I've done the basic bracer pattern on a lot of different stuff, so I'm pretty familiar with it. But anytime that I make a piece like this, you know, I want to put it on and make sure that it feels comfortable. Even if it's not something that I personally would wear at a convention all day long, I want to make sure that it's as comfortable as I can possibly make it for other people to wear. You know, that's really important when you're doing your product testing. So try everything out yourself and make sure, you know, when you put this on, that you're not putting unnecessary stress on some of these joints or anything like that. If you're going to sell something like this, you know, you don't want it to break in 5 minutes after they get this. So there you have it. I've got lots of extra space here set up on these straps, so it'll fit a lot of different people. And of course, once somebody buys that, they can trim these off to whatever length they want. But that's all I've got for you on this demo, and hopefully we'll get some good responses. If you have questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have ideas for other demos, you want to see how certain things are done. I was really focused more on the design and composition of a piece on this one, as less on the different methods and techniques and stuff that I use. So if you have questions, please let me know. I'll try to answer them as best I can, or maybe even do another video on some of the techniques.